Hello everyone, I'm Arali and welcome to the channel. Now that End of Dragons has finally been released and ArenaNet has told us their plans for the immediate future, I wanted to take the time to talk about where the story could possibly head and what we could potentially expect to see in the future. Obviously, as we have seen, ArenaNet has decided to take a step back for a while. Instead of just pushing out new content, they're going back to actually upgrading the core experience with the re-release of Season 1, working on the Steam release as well as the Alliance update, releasing new variants for the 3rd generation of the legendary weapons, adding challenge modes to the strike missions, and finally doing some profession updates. But we also know that this isn't the end for the game or the story. The big overarching story of the Elder Dragons has come to an end, but ArenaNet has left a lot of clues as to where the next few updates to the story could take us. Like a lot of people, I've been working on not only getting new gear and characters set up, but I've also been working on the achievements, and specifically the ones that seem to be directed at the people who have finished the story of End of Dragons. I will say that before I go any further, there will be spoilers to the entire story of Guild Wars, including End of Dragons. Now, let's talk about Season 6 of The Living World. I think ArenaNet will do the same thing with End of Dragons as they have done with Path of Fire, and that is, with the initial release of Path of Fire, they gave us a set of core maps, and with the subsequent Living World releases, they gave us more maps in that area of the world. During Season 4 of The Living World, which was the Path of Fire era of the game, we got to see more of the desert as well as surrounding islands and mountains. I believe ArenaNet is planning on doing the same thing with Cantha. There are a couple of clues to support that idea. First off is the update to the world map that happened shortly after the release of End of Dragons, in which names were added to specific areas of Cantha that weren't present before. The interesting part about that is that some of these areas on the map seem more detailed than some more obscure places, and I think that hints at ArenaNet already having planned on going to these places well before they released End of Dragons. The next few clues are pretty intertwined with the story of the Purists. Now, the Purists were originally a group called the Ministry of Purity, and specifically in Arborstone, there are a lot of achievements you can unlock that deal with the history of the Ministry of Purity and their war on the different factions of Cantha. These achievements range from what happened to the Celestial Ministers and what the Ministry of Purity did to the Kurziks and Luxons, to how they even captured Zunra, the guardian spirit of Zendai Jun. Zunra's achievement, which is called A Guardian Once More, specifically is interesting because besides again talking about the Ministry of Purity and their horrible acts against the people of Cantha after the affliction was taken care of, it also puts the members of the ministry in a different light. During your journey to complete this achievement, you have to enter the Spirit Realm a few times in different locations throughout Cantha. While in the Spirit Realm, you connect with Zunra, and it's almost as if you can see into the past through his eyes. Now, as you learn more about Zunra and his path during the Ministry's purge, you also learn that he believes the members of the Ministry weren't just pure evil. He says that they didn't get any enjoyment out of killing people, but rather that they masked their fear and hate and simply followed orders rather than think for themselves. I love that we get a different perspective of the Ministry of Purity, since they have always been painted in a way that makes you think everything they do is because they think they're better than others and under the pretense that they're protecting Cantha from outsiders, when in truth, maybe a part of the Ministry just acts out of fear of being flagged as traitors. This brings a more realistic take on the Purists, and specifically its members. There are other achievements that deal with the peers, specifically some that have to do with the leadership, and we get introduced to who I believe is the current leader, and that is Minister Yeongi, and his quest for a proper place for a hideout, and also, and this might be just me reading into these achievements a bit, but how he robbed the Celestial Ministers of their near immortality powers and is using them to lead the peers from the shadows. There are quite a few more achievements that involve the Purists, and I believe this is ArenaNet's way of sowing the seeds that will become Season 6 of The Living World. When looking at not only who is involved in these achievements, but also where some of them take place, it shows that there is once again hints at the area surrounding the currently available maps in Cantha. Specifically, there are mentions of Drowned Kaineng and Purist activity there, with some dark rituals being performed. Then, some texts also mention on how the Purists found a proper hideout in the mountains of Xingji Island. So, with the evidence provided, and I only touched on a few as to avoid even more spoilers, I believe ArenaNet has already established at least 2 maps they want to go to for Season 6, as well as a common threat for the people of Cantha to unite against now that the Elder Dragon situation has been taken care of, which is the Purists. I also want to point out that I think ArenaNet will want to use some of their new characters and expand more on them, like Yao and maybe even the leaders of the Brotherhood and speakers, Chalmu and Tetra respectively. I personally would love to get to know these three characters even more, and get some more elaboration on specifically Tetra and the female wardens and what they have been up to, since they haven't been around the known Echo Vault in a long time, and only recently have come back from some kind of mysterious mission they were on. Speaking of wardens, I will also point out that we were introduced to Dreslav, who's the brother spirit to Urgaz, and despite not having any part in any of the story, I could see us getting another Echovald map south of the Echovald Wilds in which we could perhaps meet him again, and there could be a whole story involving him and the wardens out there. I think Season 6 will feature 5 or perhaps 6 maps. In addition to the 3 locations I've already mentioned, I believe we will also get to go to Kirin Peak, which is the location of Minister Wona's estate from the bonus mission in Guild Wars 1. That particular location is important in the lore since this is where the Tengu Wars came to an end, and this mission is chronologically the first we ever see of the Tengu of Cantha, Master Togo, and Cantha in general. It is also one of those areas I mentioned that received the name change on the map, and that is pretty well detailed. Next up is the Great Turtle Highlands, which we know next to nothing about. It's again one of those areas that received the name change on the map, but other than that we do not have any information on it. Having another mountainous map during Season 6 though would make for a great addition. Lastly, I think we might get another Jade Sea map. In Guild Wars 2 we hardly see much of the Jade Sea, and even in Guild Wars 1 where we saw a lot more of it, we still didn't even get to see half of the entire Jade Sea. So I think we will get another map here. They could do a map north of Echovald Wilds and Dragon's End, where we get to see Mount Jinkai and destroyed Cavalon, which was the capital of the Luxons. Both of those seem like pretty detailed areas on the map as well. Or perhaps they could put another map next to Dragon's End. But either way, having a proper Jade Sea map that doesn't simply revolve around a whole meta event like Dragon's End would be pretty great. That's pretty much it for my thoughts on Season 6 of The Living World, though obviously I have a lot more theories on my mind, but I'll keep those for some of my streams and talk to you guys about them then. Now, what about Expansion 4? We obviously don't know anything about Expansion 4, or if it will come out immediately after Season 6, or if you will get Season 7 beforehand, and those are all good things. Uncertainty about those things usually would have some negative connotations, but I think with ArenaNet's new direction and management, this might be a good thing. It's like having a clean slate to start back up again, and they have talked about how they have looked at what has worked before and what hasn't. So I would say it's safe to assume we will be going for regular Living World updates again, as those usually were pretty successful for the most part. One thing is for certain though, and that is Expansion 4. But where could we be going for the next expansion? Up until this point, most maps that have been released were areas that we have seen before from Guild Wars 1, but the Elder Dragon story has come to a close and we will be going to mostly unexplored lands for the first time in years, which bodes really well for the game. It's a great way for ArenaNet to start fresh and give us some interesting stories and characters and introduce us to new ideas like other civilizations and cultures from the lands beyond the sea or maybe even in the ocean. There is still the possibility of us going underwater. I have talked about all the things underwater before, and I'm fairly fascinated by what could potentially be happening on the ocean floor. We do know that the horrors that drove out the Krayt, Quaggan, and Largos from their homelands were in fact not Suwan's minions as it was believed up until now. And during the Leviathan fight in both Saitung Province and New Kaineng, we find out from the Largos that the Leviathans are part of whatever evil awaits in the depths of the ocean. So I believe Suwan protected us from something under the sea that might come closer to the surface now. I think it is more possible than ever that we will get some kind of underwater expansion, or at least maybe a Living World season that explores that territory more. We could also be going to some new continents. I would love to find some other tribes or cultures that know nothing about the Elder Dragons. Maybe we could find a group of Norn that is more tribal than their mountainous counterparts, who sailed the seas after they fled south from Jormag, and now instead of following bear, raven, snow leopard, wolf, and the other spirits that we've known so far, they could be following more exotic spirits like snake, tiger, and monkey. Or perhaps we could encounter another Asuran city cube underground, with Asura that fled from central Tyria because this is where Primordus mostly stayed. They could have developed different technology that would be reflected in some of the new elite specializations. The possibilities are endless. But speaking of elite specializations, I think it's safe to assume that these will be a thing for Expansion 4. I will most likely make another set of elite specialization speculations, so stay tuned for that, and obviously we will be talking more about those details as the time gets closer to release. So, that is pretty much all I wanted to touch on. This is obviously just a discussion video, and as you guys know, I love to theorize on what could happen next, so let me know your thoughts down below. Also, I will point out that I will be doing a history of the Ministry of Purity video for you guys, and as I've done before, I will use the wiki entries for that as my groundwork, because the people over on the wiki are just really good and I appreciate their work a lot, and there's just no way I could do a better job at summarizing all these events like they do. That's all I have for you guys today. If you haven't subscribed, I would really appreciate that since I'm trying to grow the channel. Also, leaving a like helps me out a lot. I'm still doing my regular streams every Sunday and Monday over on Twitch at 9 to 9:30 Eastern Standard Time, and we do a bunch of different things like challenge runs for Guild Wars and other games and such. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you guys next time. Bye guys!